Welcome to Raptors Weekly for the week of July the 11th. Andrew Thompson is here to talk some Raptors basketball. Hey, man.
I'm back. How you doing?
Not bad, not bad. Andrew, a lot of contracts being handed out in free agency. By any chance, were you a recipient of a 4-year, $80 million deal by anyone?
I did not get any of this NBA money, and to be honest, I'm a little upset about it. There's some strife between my agent and I now. I had I put up some points the last time I played. I'm a little upset. I'm available. Just putting it out there.
Well, I'm surprised you have an agent as a max player whose salary is dictated by the NBA cap and the rules in place. You don't necessarily need an agent to negotiate deals anymore. Do you? Why do players actually have agents, and especially the max ones? Because in terms of salary negotiation, I think at least that part you don't necessarily need an agent. Maybe it's the endorsements bit.
It's the endorsements. It's also just, it has a lot to go back to the AAU culture and the way, that's where a lot of players are getting money before they're in, and that are helping open doors for them. And there are certain things that agents are really, really good for. And I think that, once you become a max, I think Harrison Barnes did this, didn't he? Yeah, he did. He fired his agent because he knew he was going for a max contract. So why did he need to give, 10% of that to someone else?
Yeah, it's like 12%. I think last time I checked, it's a lot of money, man.
12% of $72 million.
I know. Basically, from an agent's perspective, we just got to have one client who makes it big, and you're done.
Pretty much, yeah. That's where you understand how some of these guys are so powerful.
Yeah, actually, we had a couple of agents following the Raptors Republic Twitter account and asking us to promote their players' agenda on how great they were and so on. We never actually did it, but I'm not going to name the players here, but their agents were kind of after us. Hey, this guy had 8 points in this meaningless game. Why don't you guys write a post about it?
I tell you what, for 12%, I will write anything anyone wants.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about free agency before we get to the rumors that are surrounding the thing. So just your opinion on a lot of contracts, as I said, being handed out. What was the contract that you thought was just ridiculously out of left field and totally not what you expected in this summer, which was already set up to be crazy, but despite the crazy setup, it still kind of shocked you, or at least made you go, what?
Yeah, there are several of them. The Mozgov one is, I think, the most talked about one.
Yeah.
That's just preposterous.
Yeah.
The Noah contract really blew me away too. I don't know who the Knicks were competing for, because I can't. There's so many players who are in the kind of situation that Noah's in, as far as aging guys, not really sure what they have left, coming off of bad seasons, big injury concerns, not really sure how they fit in more of a modern NBA with a body that is on the physical decline. And then he gets 4 years, 72.
Yeah.
And everyone's talking about how, you basically need to almost divide the contracts in half if you want to get an understanding of where they would fit in a previous salary cap. And even then, if someone's giving out Noah, if someone like Noah got $38 million last summer, we would lose our minds.
Yeah. And I think it's good to see that despite the change in management in New York, the Knicks continue to do Nicky things. Like the Derrick Rose thing, I could totally see that happening. It's just because the Knicks would do something like that, take a chance. Noah, same thing. But the replacement of Aaron Aflalo with Courtney Lee is the one that I'm you just did nothing there. It's just you just got one. You got rid of one average player and got another average player, and there's no improvement here. You may as well have just stuck around with Aflalo.
So Courtney Lee got, a little more than half of what Noah got, but is Noah on a level that is twice as good of a player or twice as important of a player as Courtney Lee is now?
It's honestly, it's his name and the fact that he's friends with Rose. It's as simple as that. If there was another caliber player exactly like Noah, they wouldn't have gone for him. But it's just a friendship with Derrick Rose that it's Knicks. It's totally what the Knicks would do. I think they're basically trying to hold over the next couple of years before they get some more draft picks back. And the thing with them is that they don't really, other than Carmelo and Porzingis, who they're not going to trade, they don't really have assets they could flip for picks. So they're forced to kind of just live without picks for a little while being somewhat respectable. Not respectable, not the worst team in the NBA.
Yeah, Langston Galloway was their third best player last year, and they lost him into New Orleans for nothing.
Yeah.
What contract made your brain hurt?
Man, there's I think the Mozgov one was one, but the I know he's fully deserved of it and whatever. It's just the Mike Conley one. that people don't really seem to have an issue with. But when I see like Mike Conley making $30 million a year, I'm like, whoa! Like, is he like he's not a top 7 point guard in the league, and he's making that kind of cash? So
you don't think he deserves the biggest contract in NBA history?
Yeah, that's the one that got me. But most people didn't have a problem with it because they were happy for Memphis for retaining him, and overall he's been a good player. People didn't have an issue with it. It's just that when I looked at the absolute number and I see like where he ranks amongst point guards in the league and what Memphis did last year, I know they had some injuries. You're like, that's a lot of money to spend on a guy who's already basically hit his ceiling.
I understand the concept where, I mean, if you're a team that struggles to get free agents, or you can't, like the same reason why that team overpaid Chandler Parsons. Like, apparently a lot of teams are really worried about Chandler Parsons' knees, and if those concerns are legitimate, that could end up being the worst contract signed this summer. Like, Chandler Parsons is making the same amount of money as Kevin Durant and LeBron James and those guys. Like, he is making a max level contract.
Yeah.
Which is nuts.
Yeah.
If that's the only place you can spend your money, it's one thing. But I think in the immediate terms, it's not going to hurt Memphis that much. But 3 years from now, there's no way that they're not hamstrung by those contracts when those guys start to age. Yeah.
I think Al Horford deserves a look too. 113 over 4 for him. That's like what? Like $27 million a year. That's a lot of coin for a guy that's somewhat been injured and isn't really a top tier player. But again, that's just the new NBA.
Horford is a guy who he's one of the more interesting guys to talk about as far as not that interesting players go, just because it seems like people who watch the NBA a lot, like there's a wide variety of where they rank Al Horford as far as how good of a player he is.
Yeah.
I don't think he's not special to watch. He doesn't blow you away, but I think defensively he's a really important piece.
Yeah, he's just been consistent throughout his career, and that's what got him the money. And the fact that, like, it's not, there's a couple of guys at the top, with like LeBron and Kevin Durant, and after that the second tier is just widening and widening by every year. There's almost no second tier. The second tier basically is guys everywhere from Mike Conley to Al Horford to DeMar DeRozan. It's all just one big tier. You can't really separate them anymore, especially in terms of like, you can. I was going to say you can't separate them in terms of salary, but salary is so dictated by the league now that essentially everybody's a max player. It's almost like the tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 players now make the same amount of money, and that's just normal.
Yeah, I mean, you try to look at contracts and think of what a guy's value ought to be, and in a summer like this, more so than any other summer I think we've ever seen, like the value of a player is determined by the marketplace, not by the immediate marketplace instead of the broader marketplace. So we're seeing all of these guys have values that is reflective of this singular summer, not necessarily reflective of what their value as a player is.
Yeah.
And so there's just some very silly numbers being thrown around.
Right. So let me quote Damian Lillard and go, "Be happy for a brother and never count another man's bread."
Sure.
All right, man. Let's get to some Raptor talk right now. So, heading into the offseason, I think we all know that power forward was one of the issues of that we needed to address. And right now it's July 10th. We're recording this. It's only 3 days into official free agency and 10 days into the moratorium starting or whatever. And it seems like you get this feeling that the Raptors have missed out on any top players, any top targets that they might have had. So they went essentially from going to Serge Ibaka, a bit about, Paul Millsap. And next thing you know, I'm checking the Raptors Public site and I see Blake Murphy posting articles about Dwayne Dedmon and Drew Gooden. What's happened over the last 10 days? Do you think Masai is a little surprised? Do you think he'll be surprised by the fact that he hasn't really addressed anything so far this summer, especially the power forward spot? Do you think he expected business to get done earlier, and at this point he's more like, I gotta look at plan B and C now?
I mean, I guess so. I don't think that he is on to plan C and D as far as his expectations were going. I think that he had hopes. But I'll indicate, reports have been that they made offers on the Ibaka trade and that he walked away because OKC was just asking for far too much. And looking at what they ended up getting from Orlando, if we put together a comparable package, I mean, that would really tear apart a lot of what the team would be built around. I mean, like, someone like Victor Oladipo and a first-round pick and cap space is I'm not even sure what that that's definitely not Terrence Ross plus a bench player and a pick.
Yeah.
Like they wanted a lot more than that for Ibaka.
Yeah.
The reporting has also been that we were in on the Millsap discussions that trade would have been massive as well, but by all indications, Atlanta is just absolutely not shopping him after losing Horford. So, I mean, those are the names that would make you excited. Like that was that possibility, and now it's gone. As far as free agents forwards that have gone, I mean, even the guys that are getting signed by other teams, it's like it would have been nice to have Mirza Teletovic, I guess. Like he can really stretch the floor, but 3 years, $30 million. I'm not really sure that that's fitting within what they have to spend on power forward and what they're looking for. And I think that what Masai's thought line probably is that looking through, like there's, as far as big men go, there are a lot of big men still out there and available, and that market is just not hungry for them.
Yeah.
So I think his plans are probably just like he got Biyombo last year for 1 year, $1 million. He's waiting around to see what decent backups big is just going to be available for nothing, and we'll take another flyer on him. I think he looked at what was available and said, the answer for us at starting power forward is not here and available at a reasonable price. So
if you look at the remaining bigs that are available, I'll just name off a few, like David Lee, JaVale McGee, Jason Thompson, Hickson, Josh Smith, Chris Kaman, Humphreys, Jordan Hill, all these guys, Udonis Haslem, like the list goes on. They have one thing in common. None of these guys can actually stretch the floor. And I think this is just the trend in the NBA that you'll see guys like Teletovic who may not be as accomplished as some of the names that I've mentioned, even like, for example, David Lee or Chris Kaman. Chris Kaman's old or whatever. He's more likely to get a good contract early because he can shoot. And at this point, the Raptors are looking at guys, even the ones that they're interested in, Drew Gooden and Dwayne Dedmon. They're not on the top of anybody else's list, it seems. The Raptors are basically now trying to plug a hole. And I just don't see how they can do it through free agency. I think the big that they're going after right now is really going to be the third or fourth big. They still have to acquire that second big behind Patrick Patterson or ahead of Patrick Patterson. And that's just not going to happen using free agency. And in the last pod I mentioned, what are the chances that Terrence Ross and Patrick Patterson remain here on opening day? And both Will and Sean were like, it's minuscule because you got to fill that power forward role somehow. And the only avenue is not free agency, but trade.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, they've got a lot of young guys. You kind of wait and see. You hope that someone becomes expendable, but it's definitely not going to be free agency. Trevor, as far as looking for guys that can shoot and play power forward go, Trevor Booker can kind of shoot, I guess, and he just got 2 years, $20 million. So that's what the market is for those kind of guys. And Trevor Booker would not have been the answer to push you over the top of someone like a Boston now. Yeah.
So Drew Gooden's not getting you excited?
Drew Gooden has never gotten me excited.
Never in his career? Even when he was like hitting threes against us in the playoffs?
No. Every time over the last couple of years where Drew Gooden was good, I think like everyone kind of lost their minds about it because no one could believe that Drew Gooden was being good.
Yeah.
So he's probably therefore not the answer.
You remember, like, he reminds you a little bit of like PJ Brown. Remember PJ Brown was a guy who later in his career kind of like popped up everywhere. Like if you needed like a utility power forward, you just went to PJ Brown.
The 09 Celtics?
Yeah. Or what was the other guy they had, the power forward? I'm going to forget his name. The Celtics had this like this dude who was like a late rookie. He was like an older rookie who came into the league. Poe was it?
Sounds right.
Leon Poe.
Yeah. Bam.
Yeah, Leon Poe was another guy that just kind of popped up out of nowhere. And if you needed a power forward hole to plug, you just went there. And now the list I mentioned, you can use any of these guys to plug the hole. And I'm surprised David Lee's is still available.
Yeah, I've heard rumors that he's going back to the Warriors. I heard rumors as if I have sources. Like I've read people with sources who have discussed him going to the Warriors.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just them trying to figure out exactly how much cap space they're going to have to work with and then seeing where he goes. But I mean, if he does go there, I think David West and they just re-signed James Michael McAdoo, so that's where his minutes would go. James Michael McAdoo, $1 million. Why, like, that's someone who I would have liked to see the Raptors offer some sort of contract to come play power forward. I don't know if he can do it or not, but I feel like that's the kind of guy you want to take a chance at that price.
Yeah. There was like one free agent signing that another team made that I thought impacted the Raptors a little bit, because I know Philadelphia had some interest in Terrence Ross. At least there were some indications that the Raptors are talking about Nerlens Noel to him, to Philly, to Brian Colangelo, and it kind of broke down or never materialized. I think Zach Lowe was the one who reported it. And Philly essentially plugged their wing hole this week by signing Gerald Henderson to a 2-year, $18 million deal. So I think that, it's one of those moves that kind of under the radar, but it does have Raptor impact because suddenly Terrence Ross's value to the Philadelphia 76ers, who are historically, or last year or the last 2 years have been like terrible 3-point shooting team, they addressed a big need. And Brian Colangelo, who might have had some affinity towards a guy he had drafted, it kind of goes away.
I guess so, but I mean, Philadelphia didn't have a hole on the wings. Philadelphia has holes on the wings. Like they signed Gerald Henderson, who is a perfectly reasonable backup guard in the NBA.
Yeah.
Therefore, they still need a starting guard and another backup wing. So,
well, Gerald Henderson is now back in the East. I think everybody's like wondering, oh, Kevin Durant stayed in the West. Good. But DeMar DeRozan should be scared that Gerald Henderson is back in the East. In the division, actually.
If the 76ers start beating us because of Gerald Henderson, I will, color me surprised.
Okay. All right. So let's, so now that assuming that free agency is not going to yield too much, we got to look at some, I love the phrase organic growth that is always comes to the rescue whenever you can't sign the guy you want. And I had some items I had picked out on a couple of things that we can do within the roster that we currently have that might see a tangible improvement in quality of basketball. And generally we've talked about, just the generic things like, oh, JV's got to get more touches, DeMar DeRozan's got to shoot the three, blah, blah, blah. It's all, it's all tripe and it's that kind of stuff. But there's one thing that I'm looking at some tape and looking at some stats here. The one thing that I've kind of pinpointed is Patrick Patterson. I was just looking at some of the tape and I've noticed that he's essentially not a role man anymore. Or I don't know if he ever was.
Yeah, he never has been. No.
He never has been. And at least he was a mid-range pop-up guy at some point in his career. But as his career has gone forward, he's gotten more to the three-point line. He doesn't dribble the ball at all anymore. And I think one improvement we can make beyond, JV and DeRozan is Patrick Patterson becoming a little more versatile and not being restricted to three-point shooting and taking it off the bounce a little bit more. One stat that I pulled up was that last year, 76% of the shots he took were with no dribble, were essentially catch and shoot, right? And you compare that to someone like Draymond Green. I know Draymond Green's considered like the cream of the crop when it comes to the playmaking four, but his number is around 58%. So he's dribbling the ball a lot more. He's a threat to drive more, whereas Patrick Patterson is not, and he's being defended like he's not. What do you think of that guy, or Patrick Patterson? Does he have the ability to expand his game into doing something more than just spot up?
I think he has the ability to do it just because every once in a while you'll see it and it seems to be executed. What I wonder, though, is how much he spent, I don't know about the majority of his minutes, but certainly a great deal of his minutes playing at the same time as Biyombo this year. So I wonder how many of the times, just when he's the one setting the screen, if he's not rolling just because it's so crowded. Like he's playing with a guy like Joseph who likes to try to finish, and Biyombo's man, either Biyombo is down there and Biyombo's man is down there, or Biyombo isn't down there, but Biyombo's man is down there anyways, because there's no reason to guard Biyombo beyond 10 feet from the basket. So I think that the lineups that he was playing in probably really affect the spacing for him being a roll man. So the team maybe felt it was actually just much better to have him hang back and stretch the floor from a pick and pop scenario and just not bring another guy into the paint to combat with the guard trying to drive to the rim. When he plays with Valanciunas, it should be a little bit better.
Yeah.
But I do think that's a bit of a hole in the game. Like it does seem like there are opportunities. I understand how the spacing issues work, but watching the games like you, I agree that it seems like there are times where there's an opportunity to roll to the rim and he doesn't recognize it, or he doesn't want to, or it's just so firmly in the game plan for him to stay back that he doesn't. And I'm not sure what it is, but it does seem like there's something to exploit there.
Yeah, even the year before Biyombo, he was around the same number with 77% of just no dribble shots. And then the year before, it was at 84%. So he has improved a little bit, but generally, he's very reluctant to put the ball on the floor. Is essentially the issue at hand. He may even want to finish, or he may even want to drive, but his confidence of taking it all the way to the rim is limited, and I don't know how much he can improve that, because it just would add a different dynamic to the Raptors' offense.
I think that part of the reason why we like Patterson so much as Raptors fans, and part of the reason why we talk about him being the one that needs to improve so much, is just because anytime you get a chance to see Patrick Patterson play with a lot of confidence and really assert himself, it seems like he is capable of being a really, really great player.
Yeah.
But we don't always see him. He seems so much more passive a lot of the times.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
Yeah. The other stat that I pulled out was last year we were second worst in the league when it came to defending the three. We gave up 37% shooting from downtown, and in the playoffs it didn't improve much. We were at 36%. So it's been an area of concern for quite some time now, and we saw like Kevin Love when we lost to Cleveland. You saw how easily he got it, or actually the entire Cavs roster throughout the playoffs got like easy threes every time. Why do you think that is? Like, what's the is it a flaw in KC's system? Is it personnel that we're not able to defend the three? Because it seems like if you tighten that area up, like if you were a little bit better at that, we would have maybe had not a chance against Cleveland, but we would have been better against Cleveland because the three really killed us. And against Indiana and Miami, they didn't really have necessarily great 3-point shooters, so we didn't pay for it. But as soon as we came up against a team that could shoot, we suffered.
Yeah. I mean, like the Cleveland series is a little different just because it's really hard to tell what your 3-point defense is like when LeBron James is the one driving the ball, because it's just unfair the way he requires so much attention and the defense collapsing and then can make the perfect pass every time. But the bigger sample size from the season is definitely indicative of a bad 3-point defense. Not that 2 years ago, it seemed like the team thought it was because of all of the aggressive trapping. Like any teams that could move the ball from side to side after a pick and roll would get wide open threes against us because we were so aggressively trapping, and we tried to change the way they guard pick and rolls and really adjust to that. And it seemed like that was working from a general defensive perspective, but they are still giving up a lot of threes, and I don't know if that is more of a scheme or if that's indicative of, you have Lowry and DeRozan will gamble for steals a fair bit, and it seems like sometimes, I don't know if it's a rotational issue, but I to be honest, I don't have the answer, but
yeah.
I know that they made a big adjustment from 2 years ago, and it helped in a way, but the 3-point issue is still there.
Yeah.
What do you think?
No, I think it's a matter of the Raptors who improved their defense a little bit last year. I think it's a matter of like you can't cover everything, and at some point you got to decide on what you're not going to cover. And I think it's a conscious decision made by Casey that he'd rather go and help aggressively and trap and close out hard, and then potentially give up the three. I think it's if they wanted to, I think they could be a better defensive team against a 3-point shot, but they would be giving up other areas underneath, which might be even more problematic than being bad at 3-point defense. It's a question of like, we have some defenders who are pretty much very inconsistent. DeMar DeRozan is a bad defender. Terrence Ross has been wildly inconsistent. Kyle Lowry has, good days and bad days. DeMar Carroll's been injured. So if you put all these, things together, like from a personnel/injury perspective, we just don't have the personnel available to us who are good defenders. So you'll see a natural decline in 3-point defense. I'd say it's 70% personnel and 30% scheme.
Yeah, I think you're probably right with that. I know Terrence Ross loses guys on running through screens a lot or king of cup ball watching. DeMar DeRozan tends to overhelp a lot on the inside and then leave his man open for spot-up shots. We're talking about Carroll being injured. Lowry, I think, is a great defender, but he'll gamble for steals at times. All those things together add up to guys getting open for shots and hitting them.
Yeah.
That's 3-point defense is a weird thing in that those stats can vary wildly from year to year, and especially during gaps of the season, and it's reflective of how teams just happen to be shooting. Because there have been seasons where teams have, like 3-point defenses that are either much better or much worse than you would expect, and it's just based on whether or not sometimes guys hit shots.
Yeah.
That stat will write itself out a little bit more as time moves on with teams shooting more and more threes, but especially when teams shot less threes than they are now, that stat was a lot more variant.
Any other internal organic growth which aren't related to just giving JV more touches and DeMar being a better 3-point shooter?
I think that defensively, if the Raptors are able to trust that Valanciunas can guard the rim, then I think that allows them to guard the 3-point line a lot more aggressively. That allows them to change the way, especially if JV is going to be playing big minutes, and if you can rely on him to challenge shots the way he did in the playoffs and really get, affect the way that teams drive to the hoop and that other big men are given the ball, then it allows you to play defense a lot further away from the rim and be more aggressive in the pick and roll and aggressive in challenging shots and fighting over screens. Mm-hmm. And if that's something that they can do, and that's something they can trust Valanciunas to do, I think that can have a big effect on how they play defense.
Yeah, I think I'll add to that is that next year it doesn't look like we're going to have the same level of defense on our front line, so it becomes even more imperative that forget about JV's offense. I think he's got to learn how not to pick up cheap fouls. There's too many instances where he's getting 2 in the first quarter and then being a non-factor for the entire duration, the second and part of the third. It's a discipline/coaching thing, which has nothing to do with his offense. It's an area that he definitely can improve, and it has a seismic impact on the rest of the defense.
And I'll tell you what, as he continues to gain more experience in the league, just as a name, and especially if he becomes a bigger name player as far as role in the offense and his brand goes, he's just going to start getting the benefit of the doubt on a lot more calls, which is very silly, but the way that the league seems to go. Like Marc Gasol is allowed to foul more than Jonas Valanciunas is.
I thought that other than Biyombo, who obviously made a big name for himself and kind of got visible in the playoffs and got a contract out of it, the second most visible guy for the Raptors really wasn't Kyle Lowry. I know he had some big games. I think it was JV who kind of emerged in that Miami/Indiana series where he became an effective player, and people kind of knew or heard about this guy and said this guy he has a potential to be a bit of a dominant force in the league.
Yeah, he was unstoppable in almost every single game that he played before he got hurt.
Yeah. I know Lowry fans, before you rip on me, yes, he had some massive games against Indiana late on and against Miami as well. But I just felt that JV, from what people knew of him before and how they knew of him after, that gap was bigger for JV than it was for Lowry. Because Lowry was already known as a pretty good player. I don't think JV necessarily was, but after the playoffs, he was. If I'm JV's agent, by the way, I'm killing myself for having him sign that extension midway through the season, because Jesus, if he goes, if he negotiates a contract now, it's going to be much bigger than what he had.
That's one of the best contracts in the NBA right now. Yeah. If he continues on his current trajectory, that is he is at least twice as good as Timofey Mozgov, and I believe he's younger, and he makes half the amount of money, basically.
Yeah. And but there was a precedent set in the league this week where James Harden, who had a couple of years left on his deal, renegotiated because he was eligible for a greater max. So just because you got a guy locked up to a deal doesn't mean you can't re-up his salary. And I thought it was interesting that Harden did that, because now you might have other players look at the ownership and go, well, if you really value me, you would have, you could have done me a favor like the Rockets did with Harden.
Do you think the Rockets did a favor with Harden, or do you think that the Rockets had just lost Dwight Howard for nothing, and James Harden's agent said, look, in 2 years we're walking if?
Well, in 2 years, though, that's the whole thing. I mean, I don't know. I think that's a threat that you have to accept right now. 2 years is so long away, man, that nobody makes decisions that far in advance.
Sure.
I think it's just set precedent for the fact that teams can go to their ownership and say, if you really value me, you would have given me what the market is paying guys of my caliber.
Yeah.
Like if I'm JV's agent, I'm like, I negotiated a bad deal, but if I'm so valuable to you, why don't you give me more money? Because you can afford it. The cap's bigger, blah blah blah.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. You've been, let's switch over gracefully to Summer League. And did you, there's only like one game in the book, so whatever, the Raptors crushed the Kings or whatever's left of the Kings.
Yeah.
And I think by like 40 points or something. Blake's actually in Vegas. He is reporting live for Raptors Republic in Vegas.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so all the Summer League content is going to be on the site. And he's also covering Canada basketball, so it's busy times for Blake. But the Raptors have a pretty good team here, man. They got Norman Powell, DeLon Wright, Sycam? How do you say the name?
Yeah, I'm just going to let – who knows?
and Puddle on the roster. Bruno's there as well. Bebe is not actually part of the roster because it would have been his fourth Summer League, and he would have probably set a record for most Summer League experiences by anybody. I think he wanted to avoid that dubious honor. So he's basically practicing with the team.
Is he?
Yeah, he's
Jimmer. Is Jimmer playing Summer League again this year?
I don't know, man. You just put me on the spot. I have no idea what Jimmer Fredette is doing. Yeah, he should be if he's not.
I guess so, but that's another guy who would be in his third or fourth Summer League now.
Yeah, it's like Smush Parker. Like he used to be in Summer League every year.
Summer League All Stars.
but did you? I don't know if you watched the Laker game with what's his face, D'Angelo Russell hitting that three. That was a playoff atmosphere in Summer League, man. Packed arena. Everybody's into it. Game winners happening. Yeah.
That game, that's the most overhyped bad game that couldn't matter less that I think is ever like. NBA Twitter was obsessed with that game for what felt like 6 hours, and it was a summer league game that was not very fun to watch.
Yeah. So let's talk about DeLon Wright of the guys I mentioned. I think we know where Powell stands and where Poeltl and Sycam stand. But DeLon Wright's a guy that I find is, and even in the performance against the Kings, you again noticed, and it was reinforced for me, that this guy is too good to play in the D League and the Summer League. He really shouldn't be there. But he's not good enough, or he doesn't have a place in the NBA right now because of how the Raptors' point guard situation is structured with Kyle Lowry and Corey Joseph, and on the off guard, you got DeMar DeRozan and Norman Powell is ahead of him. What is his path to development? Like, what's his near-term outlook? Like, where does he get playing time?
Yeah, that's clearly an issue because, like you said, he's reaching what feels like a ceiling in the D League and the Summer League. Like, he can clearly play well. He's clearly at a level. I mean, he's a 4-year college player who's now had a full year in the D League as well. He's at a certain level where, in order to grow, he probably needs NBA minutes. He's not at a place where he's challenging Corey Joseph for minutes. Corey Joseph is a lot better than him. It doesn't make sense for him to get the minutes over top of him. But I don't think that you're going to see DeLon Wright's game grow in the way it needs to grow without getting any kind of NBA minutes. Like, he's kind of at a risk for becoming stagnant as far as that goes. So,
what's the solution though?
Asset? Like, he's probably part of a trade at some point, or he really is the long-term plan, and sorry, but you just got to wait it out. In the NFL, this used to happen a lot, where teams would use big draft picks on quarterbacks when they still had a good 4 or 5 years of their franchise quarterback, and a guy would just sit there and wait as if he was going to, grad school and then a doctoral program, and just train for 4 years waiting for his spot. I don't know if that's the best use of a talent, especially a guy who's already 22, 23.
Yeah.
So
here's a question about your asset comment. Do other teams view him as an asset just because he doesn't have any great NBA experience? He would be more in the prospect category more than a current asset category.
Sure.
And one question that I raised in an article that I wrote a week ago was that of Bebe and Wright, who do you think has greater trade value?
Maybe Bebe, but I'm not sure if either of them really have great trade value. The problem with DeLon Wright is that the point guard position is so deep.
Yeah.
And he's not 19. It's the same thing about like potential, where you probably see him as he has the chance to become a decent backup point guard. And if you're looking at a guy who is a potential for that, you're not going to give away very much.
Yeah.
So his value is assumably long-term higher on the roster than he is for what you're going to get in return for him. So what do? Same thing for Bebe. I think you talk about this would have been Bebe's 4th year in Summer League. That means teams aren't thinking that he's going to be something that he probably won't be, or, then they're not going to pay for potential on Bebe.
Yeah.
So to be honest with you, I don't think you're getting very much for either one of those guys in a trade.
Yeah. We'll come back to DeLon just momentarily, and a bunch of other draft picks the Raptors have had over the last couple of years. But before we get to that again, let's talk about Bruno. Blake had a mailbag, and somebody asked him, like, what's next for Bruno? Like, he's been around for a couple of years now. What's the thing that he has to improve on next? And Blake basically wrote shot selection, and his exact response is shot selection. It makes sense to give him as many touches as he wants, but this will be the first time he's playing with so many talented players in a while, and he'll need to rein in his D-League gunning to fit in for the tournament. It should also help with his efficiency if he focuses on spotting up, crashing the offensive glass, and being ready to help out on the corners. This is the thing about Bruno, man. If you've seen any of him, you just know that what he's doing for the last year is basically doing a lot of catch and shoot, and like deep catch and shoots from like 26 feet out, because the Raptors are trying to make him into a 3-point shooter. And I find that in that process of developing his 3-point shot, he really hasn't upped his game in the other areas that are so important in basketball, like rebounding, like defense, like basically everything else, because he's so focused on essentially being a 3-point shooter. There's not a question in here, but Andrew, Bruno,
I mean, look, he was 2 years away from being 2 years away 2 years ago, so he's still 2 years away by that stance, if that's the timeline that was set. Yeah. When he first started, he looked terrified on a basketball court. Like, he was a little bit lost, and maybe wasn't totally aware of how this long, gangly body that he had worked. Shot selection is a thing. I think like just assertiveness, like comfort and assertiveness. He's got such a length to him that you think he ought to be able to use that, but it seems like it's not that he doesn't know how to use it. It's that he just doesn't. He chooses not to. He stands still. He's hesitant. He's still trying to figure out the pace of the game and where he's supposed to be in it. And until he gets comfortable in that, I don't think he's going to look anything remotely close to NBA ready. Maybe he never gets there. Maybe it takes another year or two of basketball at this speed and level.
Hey, what has a higher probability of materializing? Bruno becoming a solid actual rotation NBA player, or a Trump presidency?
Ooh. I want to believe so badly in the Bruno. Like the idea that Bruno might not be a rotational player isn't that upsetting. Like it's a bummer, but you know that it's more likely than not that he's not ever actually going to be a thing. Which, by the way, for what was he, the 21st, 22nd overall pick?
I think he was 20th.
Yeah, like
that's not that bad. I mean, it's not like you blew a lottery pick.
Yeah, the Trump presidency would be that bad. Would be that big of a deal. Would be so. It would shatter my faith in humanity to a level.
But the question is, what is a higher probability of happening?
Well, I'm going Bruno. I
really? Oh,
I have to, man. I have to.
I think.
I have to. I need to have some hope.
I got to go with the Trump presidency, man. I think that has a better chance of happening than Bruno becoming a rotation player. Tell us what you think, listener.
If there's anything remotely close to a Trump presidency that can happen, then I'll just be in such a dark pit.
Yeah. By the way, listener, as you can tell, summertime podcasting is here.
Yeah. It'll only get worse.
Yeah. Or better, depends how you want to look at it. So, hey, NBA Draft.net has these things called like projections. Like, so anytime a rookie comes in, they give you like on who the guy is projected out to be in the league. And I looked up a few, and here's a couple of interested ones. Let me see if you can guess this. Norman Powell, when he came into the league, this is before he kind of blew up or whatever, his NBA projection was, take a guess.
I know the answer, so it's a little unfair.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay, so because that's into the list. Okay.
If I was just to make a reach, we're going to go with body type, so we're going to say undersized, but with reach, so they're going to go defense. Yeah, I don't know. I got nothing.
Yeah, it's Tony Allen. Tony Allen, which is what did you make of that comparison at the start? Because it didn't make sense to me.
Here, the whole notion of this like projection thing is just insane to me or the way they do it is just dumb. Because most of the time they don't pick someone who's actually reflective of exactly what a player is like. Like anytime you have a guard coming into the draft, anytime there's a guard who doesn't necessarily have an outside shot, but he's a slasher, they're like, the immediate comparison is Dwayne Wade. It's like, no, like there cannot be three guys in every draft who their comparison is Dwayne Wade. Dwayne Wade is one of the 30 best players of all time, probably, and one of the 3 best shooting guards you've ever seen. There are not 3 guys every single year who could be Dwayne Wade. That's just not the reality. All of these like projections always pick someone who is the best or amazing or great. So Tony Allen is like no joke, one of the best defensive players in the history of the NBA.
Yeah.
Having said that, Norman Powell is already so much better offensively than Tony Allen has ever been.
Yeah.
But not even close to the defender, because that's such an unfair comparison. Norman Powell will never be the defender that Tony Allen is. People don't understand how ridiculously good Tony Allen was defensively.
Yeah. Here's one that kind of made sense to me now that I look back in hindsight, but obviously I don't think it's panned out that way, but at the time I can see why you made this comparison. Terrence Ross was projected out to be Eddie Jones.
Okay.
Eddie Jones was a pretty good player in his day. I mean, he was a good defensive player, developed a good three-point shot. With the Lakers, he was basically, after Shaq and Kobe, it was Eddie Jones.
And, Eddie Jones was good.
Yeah. And at the time, Terrence Ross, Eddie Jones, same body type, same kind of skill, three-point shooting, good defense, at least allegedly. Totally made sense to me at the time, but obviously hasn't panned out that way.
No, I mean, again, it's a body type. You're like, who does he physically remind me of? It's the same reason that like people almost never will do like a cross-racial player type.
Yeah.
It's like if there's any kind of like no black player ever gets compared in type to a white guy, no white guy ever gets compared in type to a black guy. It's just nope. We can't possibly consider that there'd be someone who reminds me not like that. And Eddie Jones, again, similar body type as Terrence Ross, but Eddie Jones was great with the ball. Like he had handle, he could go to the rim. Very different player. I think Eddie Jones averaged like 4 or 5 assists one year, I think. So very different players in that sense.
I think they even shy away from making comparisons or projections across light-skinned black guys and dark-skinned black guys.
Yeah, it's so much of it is just like quick, simple conclusion.
Easiest,
there you go.
Yeah. Well, actually, the next one is a little DeLon Wright. I don't know. You don't know the answer to this one. At the time, was projected out to be Jordan Clarkson.
Not even close.
Yeah, I know. They blew this one up. And JV, listener, if you want to guess, was projected out to be Andrew. I'll give you a hint. It's a white guy.
Yeah. No kidding.
He had actually 2 projections, and both of them were white. One of them was a former Raptor.
Zontabak?
No, come on now. No, but that would have been totally fair at the time. Yeah.
I'm just trying to think of even Eastern European white guys.
Yeah, Primoz Brezic was his, which I thought was
that dude existed.
That's a little harsh, I think, on JV as a 4th or 5th pick or whatever he was. I think Primoz Brezic might have been a little harsh.
He's the guy who slipped to 5th in the draft.
Yeah, I don't see it happening. But the other guy was Spencer Hawes.
Not the way they play at all. Like that's.
Yeah. It's one of those comparisons that even at the time doesn't make sense.
That's why I really enjoy the Basketball Reference player, like how they'll. So they do it the right way, where you'll look up a guy and let's see, like, all right, well, who does he remind me of? And you'll just see 12 names that you don't recognize from the history of basketball that have very similar stat types.
Yeah. We'll do a couple more, man. All right. Or 3 more. DeMar DeRozan, former Raptor here, comparison.
Oh, Dwayne Wade for sure is who they had him with. I'm guessing.
Nope. Former Raptor.
Former Raptor slasher?
Just former Raptor. I can't give you any more specifics than that. Okay, I'll just tell you. Vince Carter. I don't see that happening at all.
What?
The athleticism between DeRozan and Vince Carter is just not even the same. I think
not even the same, but also Vince played forward in college and was a great shooter, and DeMar is a straight guard who could not shoot in college.
Yeah. NBA Draft.net, you're not really looking good in this podcast at all.
No.
And last 2, Bruno Caboclo, don't say Kevin Durant, but one of his Oklahoma City teammates he was projected out to be.
Serge Ibaka?
Yeah.
Yep, that's an international player with length and athleticism comparison.
Exactly. I mean, it's a foreign guy. Compare him to a foreign guy.
Yep, exactly.
And finally, Bebe was compared to Samuel Dalembert, which, okay, I can see that. Because in my mind, when I saw Bebe, I was like, yeah, Dalembert makes sense. Maybe if you're going to be harsh, you could go to like a Lauren Woods type. But his other comparison makes little sense. It's Joakim Noah.
That's probably a hair thing.
I wouldn't be surprised.
We'll go with Noah.
Would not be surprised. So there's your NBA Draft.net projections. As I went through this list, I kind of lost faith in what it means to project people out. So I'm not going to do that again. But hey, a couple of more topics before we call it quits for the day. Did you catch? Did you follow at least Canada losing France in Olympic qualifying, thus ending their dreams and hopes of getting Zika in Brazil?
That's right. So, by the way, on that note, how many guys do you think didn't show up for the team because they, were just tired after the season, or they wanted to make sure they didn't hurt themselves if they're in a contract position? And how many guys were like, look, I don't really want to go to Rio anyways. Like, I don't want to go. The Zika thing, maybe. I just don't want to. So that's why they're not playing for the team right now. Because most of, Corey Joseph and Melvin Ejim were our 2 best players, which is I think those guys are both good, but most of the guys sat this out.
I don't think it's because of the Zika, to be honest with you, because it's not like you're a swimmer. There's dead bodies floating up to the beach in Rio. There's people drinking water. You're on a basketball court. You're not yachting. You're not swimming. You're not kayaking. You're not doing those sports. So I think just given the way these players are treated, their travel accommodations, honestly, I don't think Zika would have been a big issue for at least NBA players. I think it's a question of just taking the summer off. And what kind of got me was that I get that Andrew Wiggins, Kelly Olynyk, Nick Stauskas, not that he would have helped much, Andrew Nicholson and Dwight Powell sat out, even Jamal Murray for that matter. I would have liked to see these guys just participate in the qualifying tournament and get the team there.
Sure.
And then you can sit out Rio because, you're not playing in Rio right now. You could have just suited up and, it was a close game against France. There were moments there where you felt like this was a winnable game, even with Tony Parker going off. It felt like the Canada actually had a chance. And with those guys, I think they might have had a chance to actually win the tournament and proceed. But, that's what kind of bugs me.
Sure. Yeah, I get it. Like, there's not the need to play. Like, there's so many guys sat the tournament out that it's obvious that it's not a priority to play for the national team still.
Mm-hmm.
Which is too bad because, again, if we have everybody playing, this is just to qualify for the tournament, but if we have everyone playing, we have a pretty damn good national team now at this point.
Yeah.
It's very young, but it's good.
Yeah. And also, let's not forget that this is not, Canada's in this tournament because they failed last summer to qualify. They blew that game against Venezuela, I think it was. I think Venezuela, and in the semis, that's their chance of making the Olympics. Not this year. This year was almost like a safety net, maybe plan B. But their real chance they blew last year when they lost to Venezuela was not a great team, and we lost that one. So in 4 years again, I guess.
Yep, that's the way it goes. Everyone will be in their prime at that point. That's when it'll be a real bummer when Wiggins and Murray and a lot of these other guys are starting to hit their absolute peak, and if they don't play at that point, then that's a big bummer. But your boy, Nando De Colo, has roasted us this morning in that game.
Yeah, Nando was good, man. Him and Rocco are like the two unfortunate guys who never quite made it to the team. I think we still own his rights. We keep renewing them.
We had to make some sort of qualifying offer to retain the rights. Like it was
just
you
in
don't
case.
You don't have to pay anything, but you have to there's cap space you have to commit in theory to it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that deadline has passed. I think it passed, and I don't know if we did it or not.
Yeah.
You had to declare I don't know, 1.3 million in cap space or something like that in order to retain the rights.
Yeah. Hey, news just broke, Andrew, and I'm gonna get your reaction on it because I know this guy was a near dear friend and to us. James Johnson is no longer with the Raptors officially. He has signed with the Miami Heat on a 1-year, $4 million deal. Give me some parting words? I know I put you on the spot here. Some parting words for James Johnson, maybe a poem, maybe an ode, maybe a bit of a soliloquy as you go off mic and reflect on what James Johnson has meant to you over the years, Andrew, both as a fan of his, as an admirer of his, and also just as a general awesome human being that is. Your thoughts, Andrew? I'll leave the mic over to you.
We'll always have I caught that joint back and banged on him. That was a great moment. We'll always have that. We'll have remembering when we demanded that you play more 2 years ago, and then we'll remember kind of quietly being disappointed that you're a little chubby this past season.
Yeah. The James Johnson evolution, if you look at his end-to-end career with the Raptors, both stints, was he came in as a brash young man and was a little, maybe a little questionable work ethic a little bit, took some bad shots his first stint, came back and found his way in the NBA, knew what he had to do to become an NBA player, had a couple of good stints a good season in Memphis. The Raptors got him back and he was pretty good his first year. Overperformed, I'd say, both offensively for sure because nobody had any expectation there. Defensively, he was okay. And as you said, against Joe Johnson, I think we were begging him to guard Joe Johnson instead of like Terrence Ross and Tyler Hansbrough, and begging him to guard Paul Pierce when we lost in that 7-game series, and then last year again with the Wizards. And then this year, unfortunately for him, it didn't work out. Things started off okay, but in the playoffs, when we called upon him, maybe due to lack of playing time, he appeared and he looked like he had been to Tim Hortons for like an overnight stint.
I think that was injury related. He had a lot of wear and tear injuries and banged up, and I think he did not get the opportunity to maintain the level of conditioning that you would normally have with all the injuries he had going on this year. I don't hold him accountable for that. I don't think it was like a Boris Diaw getting fat on Charlotte barbecue scenario. I think there were a lot of injuries that stopped him from being who he's capable of being. As far as what he was getting paid, he far and away exceeded the contract that he had here. I have no ill will towards James Johnson whatsoever.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to punish us in Miami either, because I don't know what the hell that team is now.
What is that team? Analyze Miami for us. Dwayne Wade's gone. Chris Bosh is injured. They basically re-signed. Are they in rebuild mode? Actually, that's our next topic here on basically it was like, let me just set this up as a podcast host. Is that what team in the East basically improved the most right now, given what's transpired over the last 10 days? So you got Celtics getting Al Horford, Heat with Whiteside, Bulls with Rondo Wade, Knicks with Noah Rose, Hawks with Howard, Pacers with Al Jefferson, the Magic with Biyombo, the Bucks with Delhi, the Pistons with Ish Smith. So overall, what's your feeling so far in terms of what team in the East has made the biggest step up?
Boston, no question. I mean, Al Horford is really, really good, and one of their biggest problems was they didn't have a legitimate big man to guard the rim, and they didn't have a real starting five, and they got a really good real starting five, and they're going to continue to develop with their young guys, and they're really well coached, and they still have crazy depth, and they still have all of these weird trade assets to try and make something happen. I think Boston is unquestionably the top contender for the number 2 seed in the East, I think. After that, Charlotte's kind of quietly had a nice offseason, brought back a lot of the same guys, made some interesting moves. I think they'll be as good, maybe a little bit better, as long as no one takes a major step back. But after that, I mean, who do you think's gotten a lot? I don't think anyone else in the East has really gotten better. Like Miami is going to be a big step back, I think.
Yeah.
Chicago is, I don't know what the hell they're doing there. That is a weird team that I definitely want to check it out, but I don't know how those guys all play together. You're really going to play Rondo, Wade, and Jimmy Butler regressed from 3 last year. That team can't shoot.
No, absolutely, man. Yeah, you can keep going, but I'm just nodding my head here because you're right. I mean, if you look at the Pacers, did a couple of switcheroo. They got rid of George Hill, and I think got Jeff Teague. You could look at that as an upgrade. They got Al Jefferson to basically not even as a player, but more of as a coach for Miles Turner. I think that's at least the stated rationale.
They're just gonna. I think their backup units are gonna be like, look, we're just gonna throw it to Al in the post, and he's just gonna roast rookie centers and journeyman big man. That could be a really efficient 14 minutes a game that he plays.
It's hard to argue against Boston right now, but a team that was kind of in the wings and it's still kind of waiting to do something in the playoffs, kind of like the Raptors were up until this year, or the Hornets. They re-signed Batum, they got Ramon Sessions. Roy Hibbert is now there. Not that it matters, but apparently the theory is that with Patrick Ewing being a former Georgetown guy, he might help him out a little bit, maybe rejuvenate his career. I think that's one of those teams that kind of like the Raptors is depending on organic growth to get better. Yeah. And I'd say Celtics for sure. And I see Hornets just by them being, playing together for another year, just overall getting better as individual players might pose a bit of a threat. But other than that, I think the East has generally has become more top heavy with Boston improving and maybe the Hornets improving a little bit. But the rest of the guys, like Indiana, maybe you could make a case has improved a little bit, but nobody's really made wild improvements where they're now, contending Cleveland as a challenger.
Cleveland is miles away the best team in the East still, and then I think that you have that Charlotte, Toronto, Boston next gap there. After that, I mean, Atlanta will be interesting, but I think that trading out Horford for Howard and then lose, they got a lot of. Last year, it seemed like between Schroeder and Teague, one of them had a good game almost every single game, and you were going to have a lot more variance in your point guard play, which I think Schroeder's good, but he's a bit of a wild card, so you're going to have a lot less reliability from a team that was really one of the more in and out reliable teams as far as the way they played the last 2 years. They're going to be wildly different to watch this year. I think they're still smart. I think they still have Paul Millsap and some good spot pieces, but I think they take a step back. So I think the bottom half of the Eastern playoffs is lagging. I don't know who makes it in.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I think it's Boston. And as much as I hate the Celtics, I think it might be good to have a healthy division rivalry going for the next couple of years. Because frankly, it's been a bit boring with the Knicks and Celtics being shit and the Nets and Philly. It's boring. I think now you're going to get some competition, and maybe next year, if we win the division, it might actually mean something.
Sure, the Knicks could be entertaining. the Knicks have had one of the least fun teams to watch over the last few years. And now with Porzingis and, just curious to see, I mean, like the Derrick Rose, Noah thing, like that could be fun or could also just be sad. Like I didn't have fun watching Derrick Rose play basketball last year. It just sort of bummed me out. Hopefully that doesn't continue. So the Knicks could be fun to watch, but you're right. Like the Atlantic Division matchups have not been super satisfying.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the case. So I think we've kind of, and don't worry, listener, we'll come back and talk about the East, but let us save some content for another day because it is a long summer and we got to drag this one out. But in that little couple of minutes ago, you mentioned Boris Diaw, Andrew, as a I think you mentioned his name. And anytime I hear the word Boris Diaw, the first thing that pops into my mind, Andrew, is this clip of Bill Walton on YouTube describing Boris Diaw.
Smush Parker taking the direction from Kobe, and Bryant is fouled by Raja Bell.
Robert Sarver from San Diego, the University of Arizona, bought the team from Jerry Colangelo, and the vision to somehow acquire Boris Diaw. And when you look at Boris Diaw, what he's done to this franchise, he's changed everything. And as we celebrate his brilliance, and when you talk to Boris Diaw, what a classical human being he is. It was 201 years ago today that Beethoven's Symphony No. 3 in E flat, which escorted in the age of romanticism in music. And when I look at Boris Diaw, I think of Beethoven and the age of the Romantics. This guy has got it all.
Love Bill Walton.
He needs to be calling more games, man.
Yeah.
He needs to be out there. What is he doing? Is he calling games? I haven't seen him on TV for a while.
He does college stuff sometimes. I saw him a couple times doing that. I don't know. He's going to, there's a lot of big final year, the Grateful Dead tours this year that he probably went to.
Yeah.
Just
yeah.
Doing what I think we all know Bill Walton's doing.
Yeah, Bill Walton, what a classical human being he is. He kind of reminds me of Beethoven's Symphony No. 5 in E flat. Well, I think that kind of wraps the podcast up. I think once again we want to say goodbye and thank you to James Johnson, who is also a classical human being. What song does he remind you of, Andrew?
I have nothing for this. I don't know.
You got nothing.
It does not make me think of music. Let me put it that way.
But he did have that that jam over who was it again? Was it
It's Drummond.
Was it Drummond? Yeah.
Banged on Drummond, man.
Yeah, that was good. Yeah, as an ode to James Johnson, I think we would be doing a disservice if we don't play that clip one more time. So here you go, guys. It's James Johnson dunking all over Andre Drummond.
A lot of it has to do with that second unit. Here's James Johnson exploding.
Oh, man!
With an absolutely monstrous jam! Yeah!
Wow,
You're
that was ridiculous.
Strong.
You have got to be kidding me. Oh, that was nasty. That was the nastiest dunk of the season.
That's one of the best power dunks I have seen live.
There you go. That's Devlin calling the great James Johnson's powerhouse dunk on Andre Drummond. And with that, we'll sign off from Raptors Weekly. Andrew, thanks again for coming on, man.
Good to talk to you again as always, Zarar.
We'll see you again next week.